What are your favorite writing questions you ask yourself when you're beginning a story, when you're going back to revise a story?
I ask myself, why do you want to tell this story? What part of the human element, what are about the characters that interest you? What are the juxtaposition of those characters? How are they going to create friction? How are they going to create fiction with one another? What's dramatic about it? What is the arc? What are the lessons to be learned? And again, to ask the why now, why in general, why these people? What makes them so important to a greater idea? And why is anyone going to care when it's finished? And do I care enough about these characters and their situation that they're put in to stay with it in the long run, even if it's going to take 5-6 years to make it happen? So those are the things that I sit down with, because I get ideas all the time. But you really have to love each story like it's your baby.
And you said at times you don't necessarily always like the character, or maybe you, at first glance, you wouldn't like the character until you dig deeper and find out some of the reasoning behind their choices.
Yeah, I want to search. I want to go through the labyrinth of their mind and their life experiences and figure out why they've locked some precious, vulnerable thing away in an oubliette inside of them. And once I can look through those corners of that character and find it, I'm like, oh, that's the pain. And this is how it's manifested. And that doesn't let them off the hook for the actions that they've done, but it almost makes them more human, which can be scary and uncanny, because I think that people can understand that kind of hurt, whatever that hurt may be. And so they're not just a monster in the dark. They're not the boogie person. They're someone that has a tragic, flawed past, and this is the outcome.
And how is writing connecting with others?
Just like my mom would get letters when she wrote for the newspaper, or short prose pieces that she got published in Writer's Digest, which was a magazine. I think it's still a magazine. She taught a class. I think she taught a class, or she had a professor that she was learning from use one of her examples in prose writing. And I think having that knowledge that you're not alone, and that the things that you feel, good and bad and everywhere in between, other people feel that way too. And the more you can communicate about those things, the better. And a beautiful example of that was my first feature film that I co-wrote with Florencia Lozano, and I directed and produced with my production partner, Brian Long. And that was in 2020. And I was so out of my depth. I just jumped in the deep end of the pool. I'm like, I'm gonna do this. And it was right before COVID got announced, so we were luckily a little bit in a bubble. But the story, Life After You, is inspired by a book called Life After You, What Your Death from Drugs Leaves Behind, written by Linda Latterman. And her family lives in New Jersey, and they found their 19-year-old son, Danny, dead in his bedroom from an overdose of heroin that was laced with fentanyl. And no one in the family knew he was using. He hid it very well. They think that he was in the very beginning stages because there were no signs of anything. There were a few things that were missing, like a family heirloom of his dad, Tito Latterman's. So Florencia and I decided that we wanted to tell the true story of what the Lattermans went through after they found their son, and how the community around them, they lived in the suburbs, reacted to it. The way that the family, there was an older brother, older daughter, and then the mother and father, how each of them suffered from grief differently. and how they stayed together as a family. And they really worked with Florencia and I very well. And when we finally finished shooting it, Florencia was also the star in it, and she won so many awards because she's beautiful. When we finally finished shooting the film and locking it and doing all the sound and totally locked version, Linda and Tito Latterman were the first people that we were going to share it with. And they're this wonderful Italian family, so they didn't just invite like 1 or 2 people or watch it alone. They invited like 30 people and like put it on the TV. And I knew that they were going to be screening it that night, and I was having a heart attack because here it is our job to tell one of the worst moments of their family's life and to get it right with compassion and honesty, especially because this is happening everywhere. And that's what Linda wanted to say. She wanted to scare the heck out of kids with her book by saying, like, this is what happens. And I think she did a great job with it. So it was juggling that, and she called me the next day, and she said that we had done it. And it was such a profoundly amazing moment. And so that was the first step. And then when we started taking it to festivals and we did screenings across the country, and we would always have talkbacks afterwards for the viewers. And we would always have a person from the community who specialized in addiction prevention and education and recovery, and always had somebody there at those talkbacks, and had Linda and Tito would come a lot of times, Florencia would come a lot of times, I was there. And it was so beautiful to see how many people would speak about their own personal experiences, and sometimes there were tears, sometimes there was laughter, and either they were going through it, they knew somebody who was going through it, they had lost, someone had died who was an addict and overdosed. And the more we did, it was overwhelming. And that was the power of writing, and that was the community of writing. And that's what, good storytelling in any form, whatever subject, does. It brings people together.
Sure. You just, in talking about this, you jog my memory of the book Go Ask Alice, which is from, I believe, the late 60s. And I hadn't known until recent that there was actually not a true story. It was basically done to scare young people away from drugs at that time. And so, yeah, I remember reading this life. It was basically a found diary of this woman who didn't escape drugs and what she went through and trying to get off of them. And so, yeah, it's very powerful.
I'm very happy that it's starting to be addressed now, especially the fentanyl. But I mean, it's more than just fentanyl. It's the addiction and why people become addicted to whatever. It's those are the conversations that we should and are starting to have. So that brings me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and part of the book, just to wrap up, was that she wasn't able to escape the friend group that kept pulling her back in, and that was a big part of her.
Yeah.
Wanting to be accepted, wanting certain guys to like her, and so then being part of that world, and then she wasn't able to get away from it when she wanted to. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very common in life. Yeah.